Hey everyone, my name is Cristi and I produce and DJ electronic music as Cristi Cons. In the past year, I've gotten extremely excited about Dolby Atmos after listening to my friend Danny Days' Blue album, which I recommend you all check out. The experience has left me speechless at the time, so I set myself up to install a system of my own and dive into the world of immersive audio. We're in Orion Studio, the creative space I share with my friend Misha Blanos, and I will talk about and show you how I set up the system, how I calibrated it, and how I monitor the speakers inside the Orion Studio surround menu. And lastly, we'll dive into one of my songs that I've initially produced in stereo, but I'm currently mixing in Atmos. For those unfamiliar with the concept, Dolby Atmos is, in my humble opinion, a much more engaging way of experiencing audio recordings, where the listener is placed at the center of a three-dimensional space where sound is coming from all directions. So front, sides, back, and above. The brain of the system is the Antelope Orion Studio, which I use to calibrate, time align, and monitor the speakers. I'm using the physical outputs breaking out from the DB25 cable in the back of the interface to XLR connectors in the back of the Kali speakers and the subwoofers. The system you see around me is a 7.1.4 system, meaning 7 surround speakers, 1 LFE or low frequency effects, and this might be confusing since you can physically see 2 subwoofers, but they are actually linked together and working as one inside the Antelope Orion menu, and 4 overhead speakers. For the surrounds and overheads, I'm using Kali Innate Mark IIs, and the subwoofers are custom-built closed cabinets. For the speaker position, we've consulted the Dolby speaker setup guide, then threw it into GPT to calculate the exact location and angle of the overhead speakers relative to the listening position, and make sure we achieve the required sound pressure level, or SPL for short. Inside the Orion menu, the configuration is quite intuitive because I can essentially patch anything to anywhere, and in this case, I'm sending the surround outputs to the line outputs, which go directly into the speakers. In the surround tab, you can set up different speaker configurations from 2.0, which is normal stereo, up to 9.1.6, which is the biggest Atmos configuration possible. I've obviously set up a 7.1.4 and use the individual speaker delay functions to time align the speakers. We measure the frequency response of each speaker using Room EQ Wizard, then use the individual channel EQ to carve out the frequencies that we're building up. You can also see that each speaker has its own individual delay parameter. To set this up properly, we measure the arrival time of each speaker relative to the listening point so we can time align them. Instead of just relying on distance calculations, we measured the impulse response using Room EQ. This allowed us to see exactly when the sound from each speaker reaches the listening position, taking into account not just distance, but also the influence of the room. Based on those measurements, we then applied precise delay values to each output so that all speakers are time aligned and the sound arrives simultaneously. This is one of the most critical steps when setting up the system because it ensures phase coherence, stereo image, and spatial accuracy, meaning you can precisely tell where the sound is coming from. This way, even though the speakers are at different physical distances, sound reaches the listening position at the same time and the system behaves as a coherent 3D field rather than a collection of individual speakers. Inside the surround menu, there's a specific window for bass management which lets you set up the crossover point. In this section, each speaker has both a high pass and a low pass filter. In my setup, for example, the front speakers are high passed at around 80 Hz, which means the subwoofers take over the low end below that point. This crossover region is actually one of the most critical parts of the system because both the speakers and the subs are active there, so timing and phase alignment become essential. Once everything is properly aligned, the low end becomes much tighter, more consistent, and integrates naturally in the rest of the system. This is one of the most critical steps when setting up the system because it ensures phase coherence, stereo image, and spatial accuracy, meaning you can precisely tell where the sound is coming from. So even though the speakers are at different physical distances, the sound reaches the listening position at the same time, and the system behaves as a coherent 3D field rather than a collection of individual speakers. To easily control the overall volume or solo individual speakers when mixing, I'm using the MRC remote. It basically acts as a physical monitor controller for the entire system, which makes it much easier to work comparing to adjusting levels in software. I can control the main volume from here. I can also monitor selected groups of speakers or mute them, or I can solo individual speakers so I can check the specific channels in isolation. I can also bypass the bass management completely, or dim the overall volume. The song we're going to be looking at is called Lonely Road and features singer and songwriter Hera, based in Los Angeles, and my good friend Alex Gavril on guitar. This mix is done solely in Ableton Live, although there are some limitations in its Atmos integration. So for this purpose, I've set everything up as objects and sent them this way into the Dolby renderer. To send audio from the DAW to the Dolby Atmos renderer, I've selected the Dolby Audio Bridge as the audio output device. And within the renderer, I've set the Dolby Audio Bridge as the input device and the Orion Studio 3 as the output. Inside the Ableton project, I'm using the Dolby Atmos panner to send objects into the renderer and position them in the 3D field around the listener. As far as the mix goes, the concept is different than normal stereo. Objects can be placed anywhere in the 3D field, although there are some guidelines that should be followed. For the main elements like kick, snare, bass, vocal, and guitar, I've kept them positioned in front of the listener, which helps maintain a strong and focused foundation, kind of similar to a traditional mix. But for the secondary elements like background vocals, guitar effects, additional percussion elements like shakers, I've placed them on the side and rear speakers to create a sense of width and movement. I've sent the reverb to the overhead speakers to emphasize that three-dimensional space. And for the delays, I'm using the Atmos panner plugin to sequence them so they move from one speaker to another. All these creative choices put together a more immersive and emotionally powerful experience. I'm still scratching the surface on these new concepts and techniques, but it's something that I'm completely fascinated with and I can't wait to dive even deeper.